her at home on oxygen. And I just kept telling Dean, my husband, I'm like, I don't think she's waking up from this. Once Sydney was gone and her light was gone, it was, what are we going to do with this now? Her passing gave us the courage to do the work that maybe we wouldn't have done had she not gone through this. So she died in November. She was thinking to the next Valentine's Day in the bedside drawer, and we opened it and it said, "Happy anniversary, happy Valentine's Day. Mom and Dad said, you two love each other." It was a reminder that we loved each other.
You didn't say that that this was like easy or that you didn't have that pain. You did. Your source of strength and what helped you cope was your faith.
Like, how do you grieve and help your child grieve? What Carson has said is, we weren't perfect. What parent is? He said, I saw you continually falling at the feet of Jesus.
Wow.
As parents. And now we are closer than we've ever been in our life. And so I think a lot of it in those moments was quick decisions, have to do this, have to do the other.
Yeah.
Sydney had a grand mal seizure when we came home, stopped breathing for several minutes. It was the day my mom had come home from the hospital from having her esophagus removed from stage 3 esophageal cancer.
Oh my.
And my mom is alive and well today, but it was something that had to happen at that time. She kept putting it off, because Sydney was on hospice and she didn't want to miss any of those moments. And they had originally given Sydney 6 weeks. So mom's like, well, I don't want to be incapacitated for these 6 weeks that we have her. But also Sydney kept outliving the 6-week prognosis. And we're like, Mom, no, you can't sit and wait. Like, you have to get this out while it's all contained. So yeah, she had a grand mal seizure and we didn't think she was going to wake up from it. But I did. I went into that. Okay, we signed a DNR. She's having a grand mal seizure. We hadn't gotten a comfort pack from hospice with like things to keep her comfortable or calm down the seizure. We ended up firing that hospice and working with a different one the very next day. But it was, I just kind of jumped into, this is what we need to take care of this. And then later that night when we got her home, and she did, live through it, but she hadn't woken up yet. We had her at home on oxygen and all the things. Okay. And I just kept telling Dean, my husband, I'm like, I don't think she's waking up from this. I don't think it's going to happen. And he's like, you just wait and see. And she woke up the next morning asking for pancakes and lived another 4 months.
Wow.
So she lived 6 months to the 6-week prognosis, to the day. Okay. It was May 7th. They told her 6 weeks. She died November 7th of 2009. And we had so many amazing conversations, and I could keep you here for 14 hours telling you all of the things. But
oh, I'm sure.
But it just was, it was clear that God had a hand in it all and his grace was covering it all. And we definitely have had a lot to live through on the other side of that as well. Once Sydney was gone and her light was gone, it was, what are we going to do with this now? And that's been a journey that my husband and son and I have been on, ever since then.
Yeah. And I was trying to think, and I'll have to tell you it later, but there is a book that somebody gave me years ago, and I can't remember why. A pastor gave it to me. And I'm pretty sure I have it still. It might be behind me on that bookshelf. It was a small book, and it was all stories of children who have had cancer and passed on. But the book was about exactly what you're explaining, like this faith, that courage, in that I don't even have the words of like how they carried out that. I don't know. Maybe there's a disconnect. Like, as adults, we just have so much more in our head and I don't understand, but I remember that book and thinking, if kids can walk that walk.
It's a childlike faith. It is definitely a childlike faith, for sure.
Wow. That's so powerful. And her, like, what a testimony to her faith, and also to you and your family, because she got it somewhere. You had those conversations. Sure. She was surrounded by it, but she led you, is what I'm hearing. She led the family. And now I'm curious, because the way you just kind of transitioned, then what was it like once she passed? How were you able to hold on to her strength and her outlook?
Yeah.
Or was it kind of a roller coaster, up and down?
It was definitely, we're human. So we definitely had moments. Dean and I really struggled for a period of time there because, as I said, I had a little bit more up close experience with tragic things, which
Yeah.
you can look at it one of two ways. I was familiar with it, but yet also it was like it amplified, right? Because I already had other trauma there. I was able to focus on what Carson needed because I think being a parent is more of a innate, unconditional thing. And you want to think that your relationship with your spouse is unconditional, but it's just not. It's not the same. I mean, you have to work at having that with a spouse, where with a child, it just comes more naturally. Does that make sense? So like, I was completely okay if Carson needed my attention because I'm always going to like try to nurture and be what he needs. But I also needed a place to land myself. And Dean wasn't that place because he was like, he's
going through his
yeah,
grief.
and he had struggled with some clinical depression and I think undiagnosed clinical depression in his life in earlier years, seasonal affective disorder and such. And so there came a point where it was very like acute in him and went to see the doctor and it just a medical doctor who put him on the wrong medication, put him on I think it was like Wellbutrin or something. And he was already amped and having irrational thought processes and things. And so that just made it worse. And so then, and by irrational thought processes, it was like, if I wasn't even thinking at like Sydney's funeral, as they like closed the casket and we're all like leaning like this so we can see her face for as long as possible, right before they close it. And then the casket goes out to the car and to the hearse. And I just grab Carson's hand and I'm like, that's my daughter. And I just want to stay as close to that as I can. That's my earthly connection to her. And I wasn't intentionally not thinking about Dean, wasn't on my radar, but he, in his mind, this irrational process was Tasha's trying to get farther away from me. And because he was needing comfort and all of that. And I was just like, it wasn't even a thought in my mind in that moment. So ended up going to a clinical psychologist, which was really helpful, who was also a believer. So that was really helpful. And he said,
did it help the two of you as well learn how to communicate and mourn together?
Yes. So it was, what it was we would meet with him and then we had amazing counseling staff, certified counselors at our church as well. So we worked in conjunction with them and he would see Dean once a month or 2 times a month, the clinical psychologist, and put him on, I think, Cymbalta or something along those lines. So it was just a more calming medication for him. And he said, I don't think this is long term for you. I think this is an acute situation. I think you're kind of crashing right now. And this will be a short-term solution if, exercise and being healthy and different things will all play a part in that. And you both will have to work really hard. You can't just sit back in your recliner and take a medication and think everything
and wait.
Fine. And I was like, and it took a bit for Dean to be on board with that, the medication to begin with. And I was like, it's a physiological thing happening in your brain right now. And I think that medications are overprescribed sometimes. I just want to say that for the record. I think sometimes we're not addressing the root issue.
You are right.
But, we're just addressing a symptom and not like the root cause of things. But I was like, it's a physiological thing happening in your brain right now. And that needs to be addressed with a medication for the time being. But just like say you had to be on cholesterol medication because your cholesterol was too high. If you then got healthier and was able, then you could come off of that medication through other things as well. So then we would see our counselor once a week at church, and Pastor Josh was amazing and really worked on our communication. And Dean was willing to do the work. I was willing to do the work. Dean had to realize that I could not be his source, and that we are, this whole phrase that's become popular since Jerry Maguire, like, you complete me, is complete nonsense, because no other person can actually complete us, right? Like, if you're looking at like who we are created in God, we should be at our healthiest 100% whole with him. We should be 100% whole person marrying 100% whole person to become 200% in our relationship with God as a couple. Now, we're not always going to operate in our healthiest. Yeah. So when I was talking about like that you complete me thing, and like the 100% and the 100%. So Dean was needing my attention, and he had to get to a place of understanding that we both did, that the other person, even in the best marriage, you're not going to, your spouse isn't going to be able to meet all of your needs. And then we had regular marriage things before Sydney died. Now all of those regular things were under a magnifying glass on steroids, and we had to deal with all of that. So we both did a lot of work and counseling, and we've gotten to where we communicate better. And the other part of it was, we weren't ever going to let anyone think that Sydney's illness and dying led to the end of our marriage or us not surviving, because we felt we owed it to her, and we owed it to our son, and we owed it to our witness to the world around us who were watching us. There wasn't like there was harm being done. You know, we weren't harming, like intentionally harming or physical or, abuse of any kind. So we just felt like we had to work. We had to do the work and in a weird way, her passing gave us the courage to do the work that maybe we wouldn't have done had she not gone through this. And then she just was wise beyond her years. And so as her mobility got worse, she was like a little grandma at that point. She couldn't get up and walk on her own or anything, or go to the bathroom or shower, anything on her own. We had to carry her or have her in a wheelchair or whatever. And she would have everything in her purse. So she'd have little notepads and gum and like 500 chapsticks and all the things. And she had some stationery in there. And after she died, in our bedside table, because we had her bed in our room. So we had both of our beds in there. Dean would have to get up at like 4 a.m. for work. And so he slept in the guest room. And then Sydney and I would sleep in there. That way, she wasn't getting woken up in the middle of the, bright and early in the morning and all of that. So we found this little note. I should have had it for you, but it was in a little envelope, and on the outside it says, "To Mom and Dad, happy anniversary, happy Valentine's Day." So she died in November, and so she was thinking to the next Valentine's Day, and she had it in the bedside drawer, and we opened it, and it said, "Happy anniversary, happy Valentine's Day, Mom and Dad." And then we opened it up. It said, "You two love each other." It wasn't like, "I love you." It was a reminder that we loved each other. And it's just
definitely, like you said earlier, like she was just, you didn't say it this way, but wise beyond her years.
Yeah, she's an old soul. She was,
wow.
Yeah, she was an old soul, wise beyond her years. And we soaked all of that in and let it like propel us in our marriage. And it's been a process. And I'm not going to say we've been perfect all the time, but I will tell you this, that Carson is now 23. He was 22 last year, got married. And as much as we messed it up, because we we're figuring it all out, right? There's no manual on like,
Yeah.
how do you help your child grieve? And even though we were doing all the steps, like, how do you grieve and help your child grieve and, all the things. And we tried to have a God-centered, view about that, but we also really, really struggled. But just the restorative love and power of God, Carson comes in and asks his dad to be his best man because he said, you are the most consistent example and friend and example in Jesus that I've ever had. And that just took Dean's breath away because he struggled at so much at some points in his journey to think that he was being an example of Jesus to Carson was like the farthest thing from his mind. Not that he did horrible things to him, but just like that, like trying to survive, just trying to live. But what Carson has said is we weren't perfect. What parent is? But he said, I saw you continually falling at the feet of Jesus
Wow.
as parents. And we weren't too proud to apologize and ask for forgiveness of our children. And I think that's another thing that our generation is learning that maybe our parents' generation didn't do, is seen and not heard so much. And so,
Yeah.
we would have, and I think to a degree in some times in the world today, we don't give children direction at all. And we apologize for things that we shouldn't apologize for sometimes, like, rules and boundaries and such. But in our actual behaviors, if we were wrong or we had a bad attitude or we got louder than we should have, we would say, Carson, I apologize. That was not right of me to get angry, and that will you forgive me? And I think acknowledging that we were imperfect and not trying to put this like facade that we had it all figured out made it to where he actually respected us more. And to be honest, my parents, I talk about that with my parents. My dad was a pastor my whole entire life, and he was also imperfect, but he was the same person behind the pulpit that he was at home. And I knew that he was flawed, but I saw him in the Word of God every day. And some people think that's being a hypocrite. And to me, it's going to the source of what you need, right? Like if I'm hungry, I'm going to eat food. If I'm failing, I need Jesus, right? It's not hypocrisy. It's like it's like getting fed in the thing that you need to grow. And,
Right.
I just always was like, well, of course, that's where he needs to grow. That's why my dad's in the Word. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, now we're empty nesters. And there was a time that we both were like, what are we going to do when Carson's here and we don't have like this buffer here? And now we are closer than we've ever been in our life. And we communicate on a deeper level. And we have learned so much about each other that now we know, like, I don't love to have a million words thrown at me first thing in the morning. Dean wakes up at 4 a.m. and is ready to take charge of the day. And so, and I also am ready to tell him everything at 10 o'clock at night, and he can't keep it open.
That's me and my husband.
So we learn in those moments. And if I really needed something at 10 o'clock at night, he'd be there. If he really needed something at 4, but if it's just a casual conversation, it can wait till 8 p.m. when we get off work and we're, whatever. It's just, we figured that stuff out, and we have figured out, Dean has really gotten involved in running. That's his antidepressant. He's not on any medications any longer. He's really kind of learned that exercise is his coping mechanism. Sometimes even so much like we'll be talking. I'm like, you gonna have a run today? And he's like, yeah, I need to go for a run, and then he's much better on the other side of that. And so that we have a wonderful relationship with Carson and his wife, Lindsay, which is weird to say we have a daughter-in-law, but it's been just a beautiful picture of I worried about that. Like, how are we going to let this other person in our life that didn't know Sydney? How is she going to fit in to our world? And she's just made it fuller and more beautiful and just gives us even more life and love in our lives. And she's just been the perfect fit. I mean, God is truly blessing and has restored our family in a way that, when I say restore, I think when you think of like restoring or restoration, I think of like, not that it was like completely ripped apart and there was no hope for us to stay together, but like I think of a flower and that needs water. And if it's just out there not getting what it needs from God, it kind of withers, it's still there, it's still existing. But then when you give it that water and it just, you can like literally see it like kind of opening back up and like restored to its full beauty. That's what I say. That's what I mean when I say God has restored our family to like this full picture of beauty of what we try to live in, that fullness of with him. And we're just really grateful for it.
Wow. You said so many things that my mind was like, oh my gosh, I want to comment on that. There's just so many avenues I can go. But one thing I wanted to back up and say is that just so beautiful how like my whole thing mended piece by piece, but picking up these pieces and like using your flower example, but making it may be different, but it's just like, it's still restored and beautiful. Like you're not broken forever. And what I'm hearing you say as well is like, marriage in general is work. People need to know that, right? You have to work at it. We are in a society that, oh, it's not working out. Like they don't want to give it that try. But when you've been through this type of experience, losing a child, which is like the unimaginable loss, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to be able to do this together, but understand, like you were saying, you also have to grieve separately because you are different people, different relationships, you have unique experiences. And that's one of the things as a therapist I had realized in my work is like, I might work with one family member, another come in, but they come in and they're like, well, they just don't get me, or they're not grieving, and I realized how important it is to bring the family together so you can hear each other where you're at and learn how to, oh, that's how they're grieving. Oh, he's angry. He's a little, you might need to run and not take it personal and understand, like, and your example with your child, with Carson, that's amazing. And that shows so much strength and amazing parents. You guys are like, yeah, we're sorry. Even though we're upset or we're grieving or we're having a bad day, that doesn't mean that I need to treat you that way. So you may not have sat down and said, this is how, and there is no real book that's going to tell you this is how grief is. They're similar. You and I talked about, we all have similar feelings and symptoms, but our experience is different. But he watched you, and in your behaviors and how you handled things, he learned how to grieve, how to talk about it, or how to, it's okay. And the most beautiful part was he saw where you got your source of strength. Hope was in the word and on your knees praying to Jesus and to God. And he witnessed that.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. I mean, that's, what I got from your story is like your faith in that relationship with the Lord is really, you may have struggled, trying to get in the word at times, but that was your source of hope and strength.
Yeah. I really honestly don't know where we would be without Jesus. And we communicate and come in contact with and help facilitate different groups of things, either at St. Jude or, well, that would probably be the biggest area. We're dealing with people from all faiths, all walks of life, all cultures, and we try to meet them where we can. And we can certainly share our faith because it's a part of our story. So we can't really tell our story without talking about Jesus, because he He is our life, and we're able to connect with people. But we also see that people who don't know Jesus seem to, they gravitate toward us because they see something. I don't know if it's a wholeness or what it is specifically, but they're drawn, I think, to the healing source that we have. I don't know how a person walks through this life and this kind of stuff without holding the hand of Jesus. I think there are ways that a person can cope and kind of get their way through life, but just in that inner healing, that inner soul work, I don't know how to do that.
They see the light. They see that light in you.
I don't know how you do that with apart from him.
Yeah. So even though it felt very dark, and in the darkest moments with both of your losses and in your grief, there was that hope. And I know you talked about there were times it was hard to get in the word, but were there specific practices or prayers or, I mean, I'm just thinking back where you were like, I don't even have the words, just Jesus, Jesus. And I tell people that are Christian in counseling, and I'll be like, if you don't have the words, just say Jesus. I don't have the words. Like, he's there. So is there anything else that you, like, passages or anything that brought you comfort and strength during these really dark, difficult times?
There were a few. There is definitely here. Please don't think I'm doing a shameless plug, but I have a bunch of them, a few different ones here. I have
okay, because I'm going to have you at the end say your book, and I'll have the link in the notes. And I wanted to say, while you're looking for that, is the journaling piece, I think, is so important in the grief work. And that's the 2 journals that I did, the workbooks, because of that. And sometimes we don't know, like, I'm one of those people, if you just say go journal, I'd be like,
oh yes, no,
what? Like, so having something guided a lot of times can help people, but it is a place to get that noise out of your head.
No, there were a couple of things. So one specifically involved, like with Dean and I, this particular passage was instrumental for me. It's Psalm 139, 1-3. Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I stand up. You understand my thoughts from far away. You observe my travels and my rest. You are aware of all my ways. So in a time when I didn't feel that Dean got me and he didn't feel that I got him, knowing that God did, Lord, you have searched me and you know me. He knew us. He knows when we sit down, when we stand up. He understood our thoughts. He observed our travels and our rest. He was aware of all of our ways, like was there, and he got us. And one thing in that moment, there was one conversation that I had with God, maybe a few times, but this particular time I was really having, I don't even remember the exact thing that was happening that day, but it was just, I think Dean was needing something from me that I didn't have, or I was needing, there just wasn't peace in the house that day. And I was praying and I'm like, okay, God, we're not getting divorced. I think you're going to just have to take one of us home. I mean, I was just saying that because I'm like, I don't know.
Okay.
I know that was just like my honest thought process with him. Like that was the only, at the moment I was like, that's the only way we're going to have peace here is if that's what you decide. You know, obviously that wasn't rational, but that was just my thought process that
that was just it at that moment.
With Jesus.
Yeah.
And he kind of, I don't know if he put it on my heart or what, but it was essentially, he was saying, Tosh, you don't, you know, it's not just Dean. Essentially, it's kind of what God was telling me. Like, you've got some stuff to work on here too. And so I made a list and I put Dean and Tasha, like Dean's positive attributes and Tasha's shortcomings. And on that particular day, there was a short list on both sides. On that particular day, for whatever reason, I was frustrated at Dean about, the only thing I could put was that he had beautiful blue eyes. And there are a lot more things about him that are wonderful. But on that day, I was just like, I can't even think of anything, you know? And so I just wrote beautiful blue eyes. And on mine, it was like, I can be snarky, you know, kind of thing. And so I decided I was going to pray over those 2 lists. And I was going to pray that God would open my eyes to see more of Dean's positive attributes, and that he would help me realize my own shortcomings in the areas that I needed to work on. Not in a
Wow.
deprecating way, not to just be down on myself, but
No.
in the real, like, sometimes Tasha, you can steamroll Dean, and sometimes you probably could be available to him, but he's annoying you, so you just don't want to be. So you need to, there were just some of those things. So I started praying over that.
Yeah.
And as I did, both of those lists grew. Dean was an amazing hard worker to always provide for our family. And he was an amazing dad. And, so this list grew, and it was like, you can be really stubborn, and, you can isolate yourself when you don't want to deal with other people's issues. And so all of these lists grew to where my eyes started to become open to both of those areas. And so that verse kind of led to that, practice. One of the other ones that I thought was helpful was, there was another day just a few years ago where I was really having a hard time. I think it was the decade mark. So this particular year will be 15 years since she died, but there was something about that 10-year, something about saying it was a decade that I had seen her was really hard.
Yeah.
And it was,
Yeah.
I think it was leading up to COVID. It was around that time. And I was getting older and my hormones weren't being great. It was just a big, perfect storm of things. Okay.
There's a lot.
My house was empty that day, and I had a conversation with God, and I was just like, God, I don't understand. I don't know why you would take my child away. I don't know why Sydney had to have cancer. It would have made a lot of sense by the amount of people that were following along. Like, you should have just healed her. And then everybody would have known that you were who you say you are. And like, I just want her back, God. I just want my daughter back. I don't understand why she's gone. I just want her back. And I'm just kind of like yelling us into this big cavernous living room of this house we rented when we first moved down here. One of those 2-story, entry, like living room, exposed ceiling, all that kind of stuff. And it was just echoing in there. And then I was like, but you know what, God? I wouldn't bring her back from perfection to imperfection. I couldn't take her out of heaven back to this brokenness. And like, the more I talked, it was like there was this more of this like divine process happening. And I said, thank you, Jesus, for your salvation, for allowing a way for us to have eternal life with you. And thank you that my daughter is face to face in your presence. So in the process, in the processing of my pain out loud with God, my pity ended up turning to praise. Because in the beginning I was like, this, and just saying it to him, and he was like interacting with me, you know what I mean? And he was kind of changing my thought processes.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, I read this scripture, and it can be very long and complicated, but just this one part. It's another one in Psalm 22:19 through 22. It says, but you, Lord, don't be far away. My strength, come quickly to me. Rescue my life from the sword, my only life from the power of these dogs. Save me from the lion's mouth, from the lion's horn, the wild oxen. And then it says, you answered me. I will proclaim your name to my brothers and sisters. I will praise you in the assembly. So it's Psalm 22 is a mirror image of Jesus on the cross in Matthew. So like later, Psalm 22:1 says, my God, why have you abandoned me? And then in Matthew 27:46, Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? So if you go through all of Psalm 22, it's like Jesus saying, like, I can feel all my bones. It is believed to have been the Messiah talking to David to pen this. And Jesus, it's kind of a mirror image to him when he's on the cross and suffering. And he's saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then in that scripture, he ends up saying, you answered me. I will sing of your praises before the assembly. Essentially, as he said those things out loud, and when we say those things and process those things with God, he kind of lets us in on the bigger picture to a degree, to where in the moment, my only focus is this is the pain I have. But when I'm sharing it with the God of the universe, it then turns into a bigger understanding, I think, a deeper understanding of where he is at work and what he is doing, to where at the end I can say thank you for this thing that I have gone through. And so there's just something powerful about processing it to God, especially not saying that you shouldn't process it with another person, counselor, trusted confidant, whatever that is. But there's just something extra about taking it to this divine source of life and processing that with him. And he will get you on his page when you're open to that, instead of us trying to get him on ours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And your whole story and it's testimony, your testimony, and really your faith, and through the ups and the downs and the dark moments, like you would not fall back, but you would lean on, and it would become clearer. Like you kind of got out of your own way.
Right.
And in having that conversation with the Lord, he was showing you, he was showing up, and he was transforming your emotions, your thoughts, your reactions. And that's what I'm hearing you say. So for people listening, that's that journey. I didn't hear you say, you took away all my pain. I didn't hear you say that I didn't have ups and downs. I heard you say it was 10 years and I was having a rough time. I was asking why. I wanted to make that clear as we're wrapping up, is that you didn't say that that this was like easy, or that you didn't have that pain. You did. Your source of strength and what helped you cope was your faith. And it really did not just transform you and your relationship, the relationships of others around you, and people that witnessed this, have been touched by it. And that's an amazing, beautiful story and testimony, like I said, to you and how you have chosen, because you're choosing to walk this way, right?
Yes. And I would love to encourage you and say a little bit of the same to you. And I think this verse epitomizes what you just said that you see in me and what I see in you when I'm hearing your story and your journey and all of the things that you've lived through. Is 2 Corinthians 1:3-5. Are you familiar with that? So blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort. He comforts us in our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any kind of affliction through the comfort we ourselves receive from God. For just as the sufferings of Christ overflow to us, so also through Christ our comfort overflows. And I think I have personally found more healing in the so that. He comforts us so that we can comfort others. And there's this thing of like, when you get not in a avoidance sort of way, once you've kind of really worked and processed through things, because I'm careful to say, like, you can really get caught up in the good of others that you're not even really taking care of, like you're avoiding your own things that need to be healed.
You're not working through your own.
But once you kind of have like worked through some things to a degree, we're never completely over it. But when you can get your pain off of your eyes off of your own pain for a while, and see where there are others out there who could be comforted, the pain of your own heart starts to heal a little bit more. When you can take that, that's where that purpose lies. And I think we can look for a why for the rest of our lives. You could be like, God, why did my brother take his life? Why did my other brother die of an overdose? Why did my dad, why this, why that? I could say, why did I have to be in that car accident? Why does this have to happen to my daughter? And God can handle those questions, but we can ask that for all of our lives and maybe get disillusioned, discouraged, because we're never going to have an answer to that question that satisfies our souls on this side of heaven, right? We're never going to find the answer to that. There's never going to be this is why, because that's kind of where the faith part of things comes in. We'll never find an answer to the question of why. But if we look for purpose, we will find that every single time.
Yep.
And the purpose is
Yep.
in the so that. And so you have been through these things and God's comforted you in the way that he has, so that that comfort now is not for us to store up for another day. It's not for us to hold on to and, be stingy with it and like, I got to hold on to this because maybe tomorrow he won't give me more comfort. No, it is going to like overflow on us to where we have to take that and offer that to somebody else. So I see that in what you're clearly, like, your whole life's work at this point is about the so that. And there is a lot of healing, and people will say it's selfless and you guys are awesome and you're heroes and everything. And that's just not the case. The case is that I heal a little bit more every time I can take it and help someone else with it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I know you have to ask it, but that you just summarized what I like to ask people is like, what would you like others to like really hear and hold on to? And that really summarizes, you can find purpose in our pain. And the so that is that you could give so much more to other people and you don't even realize you can do that. You just don't. So I think that was beautifully stated and I appreciate you sharing that. And so I want you to say the name of your book again, where, if you don't mind, and where people could find it, as well as if people wanted to contact you personally, like your social media handles or whatever, and then I'll have it in the show notes.
So the book is So Far, A Journey Through Grief and Beyond. I had been working with a publisher for a little while here in Nashville. I have 1,000 friends who are in the publishing industry right now. And the book that I had one guy in general who is a talent acquisition for a specific publishing company. He's like, you have it. Please write. You have the gift of writing. In order for me to publish it on the scale, because I'm this large publishing house, you're going to have to tweak it a little bit to where it's more about this, that, or the other. Because like, it'd be different if I was, like he signed Tim Tebow and his wife to write their books. So like, people know Tim Tebow, so they're going to come buy a memoir because, they already know who he is. So the general population outside of people that followed our journey don't know who I am. So, I was going to have to make it something that, and maybe future books that could happen, but this book, it needed to be what God put on my heart to write. And I couldn't change that for a publisher.
Yeah.
Also, I just got stumped for like a year and a half. I was like, every time I go in there to try to change it, it's not flowing.
It's not meant to be.
We ended up
That's not what God wanted.
Publishing it through Amazon. So far, A Journey Through Grief and Beyond. You can find it on Amazon. Tasha Ives, that's my name, or Eves, whatever you want to call me. And
I was going to say, isn't it Eves?
And you can find me it's at Tasha Ives on Instagram, Tasha Ives on Facebook. It's Tasha Ives Official, I think, on TikTok. Just because Tasha Ives would say.
Well, you can send all that to me. It's your name, and definitely we'll have it in these show notes so that people can, connect with you if they choose to. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I definitely want to encourage people to pick up your book and you'll learn more about your story. And I thank you because experiencing, Tasha, such a profound losses can challenge anyone's faith, anyone's relationships. It could just shatter people and they can stay stuck. But you have a story of hope and resiliency and strength and faith, and just seeing how God is working in your life has been amazing. And I thank you for coming on here today and sharing your story, part of your story, because I know there's probably a lot more. I know that you talked about like how important it is to share your story. And I'm glad that you are sharing your story and want to encourage others to talk and share their story because there is so much healing.
Well, thank you so much for having me on here. I'm so glad we crossed paths on TikTok of all places in all the land.
Right.
This has been really refreshing for me to connect with you today.
Good. So thank you for everyone listening, and I'll have all the information in the show notes. And until next time, continue mending piece by piece.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Mending Piece by Piece podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, and share with family and friends. See you in 2 weeks, and until next time, continue mending piece by piece, healing through grief, one step at a time.